Welcome back. We are continuing our peer review of day 15 of Advent of Code 2024. And in this one, we're looking at the computation of the final score. And that's defined as the all the grid locations that have an O is going to perform this math, and the math is done based off of the indices or the row and the column value that where we're at in the grid. And we are often taught to do it in this way, where we have the doubly nested for loops to go through the rows and the columns. We keep track of this indice, and we manually dereference the outside data structure using this array notation. This version actually does have the same bug that the version that our the code that tried to find the player had, in that it's getting the length of the first row of the grid and then indexing into the ith row. As long as as long as the grid has the same number of columns in every row, this isn't a problem. But it's a subtle bug where this O should really be an I. It's probably not going to be expressed in actual code or an actual runtime until it is, until it's given a row that doesn't have the same dimensions as the first one, and then your program will crash. And hopefully it's not as part of the boot up procedure of Windows. Not that that would ever happen. My version is over here, and the nested for loops are actually shown here, where we have one here and we have one here, and the actual combining this with iter and enumerate is going to be the pattern of accumulating the x and the y value as we walk through this. Arguably, this is perhaps a little bit harder to read until you start thinking in iterators, and it's doing the same work. And like for this particular version, these will both be compiled down to probably the same assembly code, except that thinking in iterators, again, you're not going to have these little subtle issues where you're doing the indexing yourself, but rather when you're thinking in iterators, thinking about computationally generating values, this will ultimately help the business logic of your code, as well as making sure that you're not going to run into issues where you're trying to iterate through containers yourself. So I don't know what the takeaway is with this necessarily. These are different, but get compiled down to the same code. You might think that this is much harder to read. I might argue that it's not. It's part of the learning process of thinking in iterators. Hopefully, again, as we go into the other videos where we're putting this into practice in our business logic, the light bulb will turn on and you'll start to understand that value. You'll start thinking in iterators and be able to produce code that is going to be more effective, more maintainable, and less error prone. That's my video here. Look for the next one where we're going to get into a lot more of the meat of how the software is working.